Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Deaf Chick's second show. We're kind of thrilled about that because we did get through the first show relatively unscathed. So since we got through that, you're seeing us here this week, and we're thrilled to have you. My name is Burgess, and I am one of your Deaf Chicks. I have with me the other Deaf Chick who makes this show work. For most of the time, actually on the techie part, she really does help, or she actually does most of the work there. We also have Sheila with us today, Sheila Hensley, that beautiful woman you see there waiting, who's helping us with the techie parts as well. But Misty Lynn, the other Deaf Chickie of bittersweetblessing.com.
Hi.
There she is. And we're excited to have you here because this show, The Deaf Chicks, is really all about one purpose, and that's to have meaningful conversations about death, dying, grief, and loss. And that's what we're going to do today. I'm really excited about this show for so many reasons. We have with us today the International Grief Council, and here we are with several different countries. We've got 3 women, we've got 3 countries, and 3 cultures. Let me introduce to you the women that make up the Grief Council. We're thrilled to have you, ladies. We have Loanne Mayer, USA, and it seems like you are a neighbor because you're in Jersey, I think, and I'm in Pennsylvania.
I'm actually in Texas as we speak, but Jersey is my home, yes.
Oh, okay. There you go. We also have Daniela Norris. Daniela, will you kind of raise your... There
Hello.
you go. Daniela is of Israel and Canada, she represents. And then Girish, did I say that properly?
Yes, you did.
Wonderful. And there's Uma with us. And we're going to be talking about really what I think grief is all about. Yes, there are those sad parts of grief, but sounds kind of crazy to say it, but what I love about grief is that it's a universal connector. It's kind of the great equalizer because we're all going to experience it. And what happened with these ladies is each of them had a particular loss, a very personal loss. And what they recognized with 3 different women, 3 different cultures, 3 different countries, that this was a commonality. This was something that, again, brought them together. So as they really grew and understood and spent time in this grief, it brought them together to form the Grief Counselor. They're authors, they are healers, and they're women who have healed broken hearts, and they're here today to share a little bit about their personal journey and how they managed what for many people seems really unmanageable. So thank you so much for being here, and with that, I want to get us started. Misty, do you have anything to add?
I think we're good, Patty. I'm just very honored also to have the privilege of knowing Uma. She was the one who connected me with the Grief Council, and I just feel honored and privileged to have them with us, and I'm looking forward to diving right in. So I think I'll start with a question, and this can be for each of you to answer, and the question is, how has the death of a close loved one affected and changed you?
Well, I guess I'll go first. We've kind of figured that one out. My name is Loanne, and my journey has been through the death of 2 people, Misty, my mother and my daughter. My mother was my teacher, is my teacher to this day, and she helped me not only to heal my relationship with her, which wasn't so great when she died. Afterwards, it has grown to be extraordinary, and in fact, today is the 11th anniversary of her death. And my mother also, in the journaling that she worked with me, helped me go through my daughter's death and helped me to connect with the other side in a way that I never realized was possible, and for me to find the love that's on the other side that I never dreamed was there.
Amazing. You mentioned the word healing, Loanne. There are many people probably who are watching or may view this program who can't even begin to imagine a healing when they're in this despair. What would you say to someone like that at a point where it's very, very fresh or very raw?
Well, it happens that my cousin just lost her daughter last Friday, and that's what I said to her, was that to remember that grief is a process. It's not an event. And I think it's very important for those of us to reach out for help to anyone and everyone who can help us, but not to drown ourselves in the busyness of grieving. And I have been in Compassionate Friends for 7 years, and I see that there are organizations that can really help you, but sometimes the process requires rest. Sometimes the process requires and is helped by faith. It depends on where they are at that moment and how they died. So to help them understand that it's important for them to have the time and take the time that they need to just be for a little while and not try to take care of everybody, which is what I did, but I've learned since that the busyness gets in the way of the healing.
Because it's hard to grieve when you are taking care of other folks too, huh?
Yes. Yes. And I think, as the ladies will attest to, that we all have different ways of finding our way through it. Mine at first was faith, and I still find myself very attached to my faith. But for a lot of people, they are just so angry and so shocked, as I was when Cindy died, that they can't imagine that being a help. So, but turning to another tool and another tool. Mine was journaling. Uma's was a different way, and so was Daniela's. But to look for the thing that speaks to your heart, that calls to you as a way of healing, and to be comfortable with the fact that it's your choice. You get to decide what's the next tool for you to use. Nobody can tell you that.
Wonderful.
Yes, I see very much a personal journey, and in my experience of it was exactly as you said. It's a personal thing, and it allowed me to really dive deeply into self, and for me, this is where the gift was. And I'm curious to hear from our other guests what the gift was for you in this process. How has the death of a loved one changed you? Thank you so much, Loanne. There's so much there I could really dive into and get into the meat of it, but we'll give our other guests with the Grief Council a chance to speak, and then we can jump back to you later. Gona.
Hi, my name is Uma, and my grief journey was pretty extraordinary in the sense my husband, daughter, and I moved to the United States in the spring of 2008 from India, where we'd lived all our lives. And 10 days after we moved, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and we lost her 8 months later. So not only was I navigating a foreign country, but all of a sudden I had to plunge into this abyss of deep despair around grief. I didn't have the usual familiar family and friends support network that I would have had I been back home. I didn't have friends here. I didn't even know how to drive. So it was like being in a foreign country and the map was suddenly snatched away. I found myself in a fog, not knowing where to turn, what to do. And so I had no option but to respond to my grief. And the way I did that was to dive deeply into death. Instead of walking away from it, I walked into it. I wanted to understand this thing called death. I wanted to understand what our purpose in life is, why we're here, what we're meant to do, why we struggle and survive, and then does it all end in death? I felt like there had to be more to this than I was understanding. So that led me on a journey of spiritual seeking and learning. I was like a sponge that was soaking up everything that came my way. And that's where I found my gifts, actually. I began to understand this journey from the perspective of a soul. And that made all the difference in the world, because as long as we turn away from death and we believe in the reality of the physical body and the physical existence and hang on to this notion that this is all there is, none of it makes sense. But when my mother died, I moved into what Carl Jung calls the afternoon of life. And everything that I had experienced in the morning of life no longer made sense. So the afternoon of life was its own revelation, and I dove into the richness of death, strange as it may sound to many listeners, but that's really what saved me. And today I'm using what I know to be true for myself, as a way to teach other people, to get them more comfortable with this idea of death and dying and the soul's journey, this beautiful journey in this life that we've been given.
I love how you use the word richness, and the reason for that is with richness comes perhaps a range of emotions that are kind of held within that word. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to death, and I guess ultimately this death business, because there was so much. When many other people were turning away, I was kind of diving deeper, as you mentioned, to learn more, to understand more. And it was like a draw, like this mystery that almost never ends. And it, as a seeker, it provides this unending opportunity to really explore one's inner landscape, one's soul, that whole entire journey. So I love how you put that, the richness of the journey. Thank you.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Patty, because the people who I work with, my clients, the ones that make peace with death are the ones that are finally willing to awaken to what it means to be born and to die and to have this earthly journey in between. Once they get those pieces, it all begins to make sense, and they come to a place of much better peace around the death of their loved one.
I think so. I agree. As a matter of fact, I was just talking this morning, this past Saturday, my mother-in-law, we had a memorial service for my mother-in-law who died on December 3rd, interestingly 3 years to the day before my own mother died. And I was saying to my stepchildren who are in this week, I was saying, it's a crazy notion, I know for some, but I love funerals. And why do I love funerals? And why do I love memorial services? Because it's a place where we can get to really be somewhat authentic and without the stigma attached. We can cry, we can hug, we can be heartfelt. And it feels like, for me, it feels like a place of home. I think that's why I'm so attracted, because we can authentically exchange these real feelings. Yet, sadly, so many folks are afraid to share, when I think that is the best that we are. Just a thought. I find it very, very interesting.
Thank you for sharing that, Patty and Uma. And I think richness is something you wouldn't think that's associated with death, but my experience and the people I've talked to, it very much is. And it's when you cross that barrier and really allow yourself to deep dive. And yeah, it's a rich experience, and I hope our viewers are beginning to get a taste of the beauty and the gifts of death. So now I'd like to switch over to Daniela. And Daniela, please share how the death of a loved one has affected and changed you.
So, hi everyone, I'm Daniela. And I lost my brother Michael a week before his 20th birthday. It was a very sudden death, and Michael was young and strong and not ill. He was in the military. In fact, he was a tank commander. But his death had nothing to do with the military. He went swimming in the sea with some friends on a hot day, and he never came out. He drowned. And his death just didn't make sense to anyone, because he was not the kind of person who would just go in swimming and drown. He was strong, he was a good swimmer, he was tall, he was young, you know, anything that is the opposite of somebody who would just drown. But I tried to make sense of his death for a long time, and being a former diplomat, an atheist, or perhaps a former atheist, a skeptic, and I still am a skeptic, I felt something very strange after he died. I felt he was not really gone. I mean, he died. He was not there physically, but he was not completely gone. I could almost communicate with him on a daily basis. And because I was such a skeptic, and because I consider myself a grounded person, I wanted to understand whether I was just losing my mind, whether grief has been messing with my mind, or whether there was something more to it. So that's really the beginning of my spiritual journey, and I've trained since as a hypnotherapist, as a past life regression therapist, and recently as a life between lives regression therapist. And it's not that because I believed in past lives or in life between lives or in any of this. It's because I wanted to understand. I didn't know what mediumship was. For me, a medium was an old lady sitting at the end of the pier in a tent under a full moon, looking at the crystal ball. And I realized that was not it. For me, mediumship today, the kind of mediumship that I explored and that changed my life really, is very simple. It's continuation of the communication with your loved ones on the other side. And today what I do is I try to help people connect with their loved ones if they're open to it, because you have to go through a long process sometimes to be open to the possibility even that you can continue communication with your loved one once you're on the other side. So this is a huge gift, and after several past life regressions and life between life regressions and so on, I got many understandings also about Michael's death. And for me today, I believe his death was a flag, for me, a flag that signaled the changing of direction. And while no death of a 20-year-old can be justified or can be, you know, anything good to anybody close to them, but the one positive thing that came out of it for me is that myself and my family and people around me have been shaken to ask questions and also to find many answers that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Wow, interesting story. Daniela, what do you think, when you mentioned how you felt your brother's presence, what do you think was the difference for you when you also kind of shared that you are a self-proclaimed atheist? What was the thing that made you look to explore this versus run the other way? I think many people, I can't speak for many people, but I've heard stories where some people may have that presence and it's very scary and it's kind of a fearful thing for them. Can you share a little bit what made you turn towards that?
I suppose it's partly my personality, because as a student I was afraid of flying, and I went and got a job as a flight attendant. So that got rid of that. I was no longer afraid to fly. So it's a bit the same with connection with the other side. I didn't know whether it was real, whether I was imagining it, and that's the problem with many people who experience it. They don't know if it's for real. And they're worried that other people will judge them if they talk about what they experience. Maybe I was a little bit less afraid about what people will say, and although in the beginning I was quite reluctant to share what I was feeling, I only shared it with very close family, with my parents. But as I got into it more, and as I got more and more proof, because again, being a skeptic, I always ask for proof, and therefore I get a lot of proof, which means something to me. My proof is not necessarily anybody else's proof, but it did mean something to me. I became more confident in talking about it, in writing about it, and in sharing it with other people. And I think those who are afraid of it or who are skeptic about it, I can really understand them, because I was in their shoes not very long ago. But I think once you realize that it is real, that your loved one on the other side really wants to keep in touch with you, if you'd allow them, if you'd open your mind and your heart to their messages, then it's not scary. Again, I'm not talking about all sorts of other things which, you know, you could go into. I'm not putting people in touch with their loved ones. I'm trying to help them and to encourage them to get in touch with their loved ones themselves. And there's so many ways Loanne has her way and Uma has her way, and that's how we complement each other, because each one of us has their own way to stay in touch with the other side. And I think that's really important. That really grounds you and gives you the confidence to talk about your experience rather than run the other way.
Mm. Yes, thank you for that. You know, it is fascinating to me because having worked in the hospice industry, you would think that perhaps there was an embracing of this kind of phenomenon in an industry. However, what I found is that many times the conversation ends at the death. And we in the hospice industry, and of course sometimes family members, have seen some things that are somewhat unexplainable. Yet, depending upon how one, perhaps as you said, it could be a personality, it could be an interest or a longing to keep in contact. I just hope that the hospice industry would begin to perhaps address these kinds of things. They do wonderful work when it comes to bereavement and that kind of thing, but I think many times when it comes to bereavement, this communication with loved ones is an important factor and an important piece there. So thank you for bringing it up and speaking so clearly and so well about it.
Yes, and Daniela, that's kind of one of the reasons I myself moved into this death acceptance movement and become a supporter of it. It's because after and during the passing of my mother, it was such a rich time that there was this space, and it wasn't like the space of normal life. It was a meditative space or a spiritual space or an in-between space, but there was a lot going on, and it's an unseen space. And in my sense, since I've begun connecting with people in this community, is that the veils between the worlds, the seen and the unseen, are thinning. And I think people like yourself that have these experiences really speak to that. And it seems that this message of there's more to the end is not the end. The end is simply another beginning. Life goes on in different forms after the physical body passes. This I find very fascinating, and this is part of the reason I do the work that I do, and that we have this show. And thank you very much for speaking to that. I've been reading the book. Go ahead.
I just wanted to interject something that I think is so important for people who are now taking care of someone who is in the process of dying. And Myste, you just reminded me, one of the gifts that my mother left me was the gift of witnessing her beautiful death. And it's very easy when you're in an environment where she showed you where to look and how she felt and how her face became glorious in this death, that there is clearly another world that is filled with love and light. And once in a while, people get the opportunity to see it, like seeing the birth of a child. It's very similar in the sense of the wonder and the awesomeness of it, and it makes you want to know more. Not everyone has that opportunity, but I had it with my mother, even though our whole life there was a lot of antagonism. That gift stays with me because she showed me where to look. And I feel so blessed to know that that happens to people all the time. I'm betting it happened to you too, didn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Me too. With my mother, I had an unbelievably awesome, awe-inspiring experience. And as you say, Myste, it's this almost rarefied atmosphere, air that you're breathing. It feels so sacred and so holy, regardless of what faith or no faith is part of the equation. And I just remember wanting to feel so immersed in this, and it was almost painful coming out of that because it felt more real, that space, and more connected in so many ways, even though at the end, my mother and I couldn't communicate, but there was a definite connection that was so strong and so real and so beautiful. It was, and I think we talked about this last week because several of us have had this beauty, had this experience, and some people have not. And it's interesting, and perhaps that's something that maybe one of the you folks from the International Grief Council can perhaps explore a little bit with us. Why is it that some people find this a beautiful experience? Are those the people that are more ready to go there than perhaps some of the other people who have not had such a good death experience? Any thoughts about that?
Well, in my opinion, I'm a hospice volunteer. I know that the person who is supposed to be there when the person passes is always there. And the experience always matches the experience that they need at that point in time. If the person, in some cases, can't get the plane, can't get there, the person who's dying will wait if it's necessary. On the other side of it, if a person is walking out of the room, needs a cup of coffee, and their mother or daughter or someone dies, it's exactly appropriate. But the hard part is for the person who is going through the grieving to find that experience acceptable for them. There's the coulda, woulda, shouldas. That's the guilt that I could have done something. And I think that's the conversation that the International Grief Council is wanting to put on the table, is that we need to talk. We need to talk about these things. And it was Daniela that brought it up to us, that it's, the Europeans talk about it more than the Americans are so stoic. So my feeling is that that it depends on what the soul needs. That will happen to them as they need it, and the gift is usually given, in my opinion, from the person who is leaving. It's a gift. My mother's gift was the best gift I ever got. She was 86, and I will never in my life forget it, because it has made me want to share that love with people who don't know that it's there.
Wonderful. Wonderful. In fact, you mentioned the International Grief Council and what you're looking to put on the table. Can you share? We haven't really talked about that as a whole. What is it that brought you all together? Obviously, a grief experience and a shared grief experience. But can you tell us a little bit about what you are trying to offer and do in the world?
Uma, would you like to address that first?
Yeah. It's very interesting how the three of us were brought together. Both Loanne and Daniela were guests on my radio show, The Grammar of Grief. And we became good friends, we bonded, we stayed in touch, and we talked. And I think over a period of time, we talked about the kind of gifts that grief has brought to our lives, and how three different women from three different cultures and three different faith backgrounds, three different countries, three different skin colors even, can come together and create something beautiful out of something so sad and tragic that life presents to us. That got us thinking, and we wanted to take this message out to the world, that no matter what our faiths, no matter what our beliefs, where we come from, what we've done with our lives, when we lose a loved one, we speak the same language. Grief is a universal language. And if the three of us, coming from the different worlds that we have, can turn those, terrible experiences into gifts and serve from that place of purpose and meaning, then we need to take this message out to the world that it's possible for others to do so as well. Because purpose is birthed from pain. Pain that is not used is pain wasted. And we're all going to have pain on this earthly journey. As long as we're walking the soul's path, there will be pain, there will be challenges. But what are we meant to do with this pain? We are meant to take this pain and alchemize it into purpose so we can serve the world in much bigger and better ways. That's the only way we can find meaning and joy in our lives. And that is really the message of the International Grief Council.
Very, very good. Now, some people may be thinking there are many people that work in the grief industry and many professionals, mental health, grief counselors, grief specialists. What is that unique thing about International Grief Council that you can share with everyone?
I'll try to answer that. I think what is unique about the three of us, other than the fact that we bring together 3 different cultures or even 4 different cultures, geographically we come from different places, is that we've experienced such different personal experiences that have brought us to a point where we almost feel compelled to speak and to share our experience and to try and help others who are going through similar experiences. And the way we were brought together was truly magical. It almost felt like something we had to do, we were meant to do. And ever since we've come together, I think we've had a lot of positive feedback from people who recognize a need to talk to 3 women who are not necessarily professionals. We're authors, we practice different areas of healing or of communication. We are normal women, we're normal people. And I think that's the unique thing about us. We don't claim to know more than anybody else. I think what we claim is that everybody and anybody can actually grow from the experience of losing a loved one, and we're there to facilitate that. But by all means, I think the professional help has its place, and trained professionals absolutely have their place when people feel that they need to go to professionals. I think that often people feel reluctant to go and ask for help from professional people because then they would have to admit their vulnerability, they would have to admit perhaps that they cannot cope or it's difficult to cope. While just talking to 3 women who have been through exactly the same experience is possibly easier and more natural. Because in many societies and throughout history, death was treated as part of the cycle of life. It still is in many societies. It's much easier to speak about death. While in the Western world, I think it's become, perhaps in many ways, a field where professionals have the answers. Mm-hmm. And we say no, we all have the answers, and we can get together and talk about the questions and talk about all the possible answers.
I would like to add to Uma's suggestions there too, because we have also discovered that grief is epidemic in the world. All you have to do is look at the news and think of the poor parents or children or whatever. It needs many people in the field. It needs many people to look at the situation and offer suggestions. And as you know, Myste, as you know, everybody in this group knows, we need many tools in the grief path. And so what we're talking about is the tools we've used that have helped us, and the tools we've heard about that have helped others, and most important, that there is hope, that you don't have to get stuck in the dark side, that you have help, you have tools, you have all kinds of things that will make a difference in your life. And it's possible that your life will be better because of the death.
What a beautiful message, Loanne. Really is. And I think the fact that you all have had very specific losses, many people who are grieving feel that no one would ever understand, and yet you've had losses of siblings, losses of parents, losses of children, where you somewhat span, I mean, those aren't the only losses, of course, but you do span a kind of gamut that many people feel a great deal of isolation when they're going through this. So, and I like the fact that you talk about not being professionals. I think there's more of a camaraderie, a comfort level of come to talk with people who have experienced something similar. versus getting fixed, so to speak, because there really is nothing to fix. There's nothing broken.
Exactly. You get it, Patty.
Thank you. It's wonderful. Myste, you look like you were ready to ask a question. Yes?
Just loving the richness of the conversation and the different dips and dives that it's taking. And for me, the real take home is just the variety that we can receive from the experience of death. And I love that the council is so diverse in each of your members, and that you each bring something different. And you touched on that the more people out there offering a plethora of services in this area, the better societies will be to step into this easier. And that's what I found with more and more people I connect with who are doing this kind of work, that each of us has our own gift to bring. Each of us has our own way to be a guide to help others through this process. And I think it's a beautiful thing. One question that is kind of on the tip of my tongue is for people who are not quite ready yet, for people who are experiencing deep grief and feel stuck in it. So for so many people, a death of a loved one can just be a huge blow and really knock them down, and they get stuck down and they have trouble getting back up. I'm wondering if you could speak to that and to those listeners.
Yeah, I think, Myste, we all need to honor where people are in their grieving process. No two people grieve alike, as we know, and some people take much longer. They need to stay in the dark. You know, there's a lot that comes up when you're grieving a loved one. It isn't just the death, it isn't just the passing, but the history that you've shared with that person. Was there unfinished business? Was there some unforgiveness? Were there things left unsaid and undone? All of this comes up for examination when that person passes away. And that's what makes grief so complicated, because people buy into this notion that because their loved one isn't in their physical space anymore, what's broken can't be fixed. No healing is possible. Oh, I didn't get to tell mom that I loved her. Oh, I didn't get to call my brother. We'd had a rift and we hadn't spoken to each other for 6 years. And because of that, a lot of angst and anxiety comes up alongside the normal grieving process, which makes it extremely complex. And so I think we need to honor people who are dealing with some of that. We need to allow them the time to process and work through some of that. So I don't think we are about rushing anyone through their process. We all take as much time as we need to. But my only suggestion to people who are grieving is to keep their hearts open, to not shut down, to allow the possibility that light can filter in through the cracks. Because if you shut down, then no further conversation is possible. But if you just stay open even to the pain, just sit with the pain, embrace the pain, be present to the pain instead of turning away from it, I think that would be the beginning of the healing journey. And that's what I would say to someone who at this moment is in deep grief over the loss of a loved one. I would say just stay open. Just cry as much as you need to. Rage at God. It's okay to feel every single emotion that comes up, no matter how dark or depressing it is. But when you don't face it, when you don't deal with it, when you turn away from it, that's when the door shuts. And that's when no true healing is really even possible.
Yes, very wonderful words of healing, and very, very well said, Uma. Thank you. You know, when we first got together talking about this show, we had talked about the potential of having you all share from your respective books some readings, an excerpt that you would share with us. Myste, would now be a good time to do this, or did you have any other questions before we headed into that? I wanted to leave enough time for...
May I make a suggestion, please, Ma'am Patty?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Sheila, we need to recognize our audience. We have Sherry, and we have. I want to highlight this message because it goes along with what you're doing here. If someone would white box me so everybody can read it. Shout out to the International Grief Council. We have Heidi, my friend. John, of course, is here. Mark, and I can't find his comment. Mark, I'm going to butcher his last name. Dieterel. He's saying hello to everyone. We have a nice active audience, and I just wanted to stop and recognize them. So there you go.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We're excited. And I think what's great about this show is that grief, as we talked about in the very beginning, the great connector, the great leveler, the great equalizer, we are all the same because we all experience and have encountered grief in our lifetime. If we've had any kind of loss whatsoever, we're connected. And what makes me feel good about that is when you walk into a room, you don't know anyone, whether it's in a work setting, a social setting, and you look around the room and, you know, we make these automatic judgments. Oh, well, she possibly couldn't know what I'm thinking, or they wouldn't understand. If we can remember that everyone there has experienced some sort of loss, it can kind of, to me, create those connections, even unspoken, because we've all had this thing called grief. So there's one of the gifts. Misty,
I just realized my mic was off.
Oh,
I just wanted to really say thank you to my friend and buddy Sherry Bilal with Celebrate Life. Sherry is a rock star. She's awesome and very much about celebrating life. And we talk sometimes about the celebrations that can be had with celebrating death. And thanks to Heidi for being here. And I think I saw Marcus is here. And John, thank you for coming. And I really just do want to acknowledge our viewers, and thank you so much for coming in. For people who are catching this on the replay, thank you, and we hope it helps. Keep up with the comments. If you have any questions or if there's anything burning inside you that you really want to answer, just put it on the table, put it in the comment box, and we're very happy to help try and answer this or bring it into the light of the conversation, and our panelists are very open to that too. And before we move on with the book excerpts, we have about 15 minutes left, and each of these wonderful women are authors, and I'd love for them to each read an excerpt. But before we do that, the question about grief and getting stuck in grief, Uma answered it very lovely. I love the deep dive into feeling and self. I'm a champion of that. Whatever you're feeling, just feel it fully. It's a part of the human experience. But I'm curious if Loanne or Daniela would like to speak briefly to this before we dive into your wonderful book excerpts.
Well, one of the things that I learned and I still believe in and I'm still working on myself is that the constant blessing of learning how to forgive myself, the person that died, the people who were involved in the death of different people in my life. And one of the things that I learned it through was this transpersonal journaling that I did for 10 years, 11 now, I guess, with my mom and with my daughter. And I think part of the lesson that I needed to learn, and there may be people out there that feel the same way, is that I had to learn forgiveness deep down in my heart. I was a big judger of people, and now I realize that that lack of forgiveness was one of the things that got in the way of our relationships. And so my constant forgiveness of myself and others is a still ongoing thing, and that's helped me a lot. And then learning to love people unconditionally. Everyone is doing the very best they can with the understanding they have, and I'm learning that again through this transpersonal journaling that I've been doing, and the blessing of having my mother and my daughter pound that into me for the last 10 years. So I really feel that that lesson for me is ongoing and probably will be forever, as long as I'm here.
Hear, hear. I'm a huge advocate of forgiveness, and it's probably been one of the most major transformers in my life as well. And it's an ongoing practice, and it's really, I think, one of the best gifts we can give to ourselves. Thank you. Thank you, Loanne.
just to add to that, Misty, somebody mentioned to me that forgiveness is like a dimmer switch, not a light switch, that it's not something you flip and that it automatically happens. It's something that comes over time, and along with that deep dive and what you all were talking about, I think it's something that it's a journey that's worth starting.
And I think what's worth remembering is also that we're all here on journeys. And today I believe that these journeys are not necessarily coincidental, but even if they are, we're all on different journeys and we all have different lessons to learn. So judging ourselves or other people on how we act or react on their journeys is not really productive. Once we learn to accept the journey and we do the best we can and we find people that walk with us part of the way, and sometimes these are friends who support us when we need their support and then, you know, just disappear. And sometimes there are loved ones who lived a part of their life with us and a part of our lives with us and then passed on to the other side. So we have all these people that walk with us hand in hand on our life journey. And from each of them, we learn something. Sometimes our biggest so-called enemies are biggest teachers as well. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the people we don't get along with teach us huge lessons, and obviously our friends teach us many things. So I think for me, the personal understanding that our journeys are all connected, yet very, very personal and very different, and what's right for me is not necessarily right for somebody else. That helps. I think that helps walk down the path with a lighter heart, perhaps, and with a greater hope, and with a greater understanding, maybe, hopefully, for the meaning of life and of death.
I love how you mentioned the word hope, and when it comes to grief and grieving, I think hope is that important kind of beacon to have out there, however changing the focus of hope might be, because that hope might be different in the beginning of the journey as it is, as you move down, it may shift and change a bit. So that word hope is sort of always there, welcoming us.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you spoke about non-judgment. I'm reading a book right now, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, and it's great, Daniela. I think it speaks a bit about your journey, and it's a story of a woman who is communicating with her dead brother, and a big part of his message is that this idea of judgment, it's just doesn't exist when you're on the other side. It's just pure love and light. And having mentioned this book, I would like very much now for each of you to take a few minutes. We have maybe about 3 minutes each for you to read something short from your book. So I'm very looking forward to this. Please go ahead.
How about if I go first? My book is Celestial Conversations, Healing Relationships After Death. And since it is my mother's anniversary and we talked about forgiveness, I thought I'd read a little bit about what she says, as I wrote it, to me. When I was alive, I didn't understand the power of forgiveness, but believe me, it is the most powerful tool of human beings. Don't underestimate the intention of forgiveness. Just be willing to forgive every little thing, the way someone speaks to you or doesn't, the way someone ignores you, the way someone gives you unwelcome advice, the way someone judges you. Every little thing forgiven takes away a piece of the huge boulder that weighs so heavily on your heart. When I was alive, I collected items to be forgiven and held them as my personal treasure. I couldn't let go. What a waste. I'm telling you from my heart, don't collect injustices. Let each one go like picking weeds from a garden. And I've been doing that for the last 10 years, and I have to say my broken heart has mended much more so than I ever thought it could, because now I don't work on forgiveness as much as I work on loving them anyway.
Beautiful. Thank you, Loanne.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll go next. In The Shift, Taking Your Life from Ambition to Meaning, Dr. Wayne Dyer talks about a person's transition from the morning of life, where the main player is the ego, to the afternoon of life, where meaning replaces ambition. My heart beats yes, yes, yes. As I tune into Dr. Dyer's weekly radio show one afternoon, I hear 10 words that stick in my mind like a fly-to-fly paper. Don't let money be the reason why you don't serve. No matter how hard I try, I cannot unstick those words. The exhortation drowns everything else out. It smothers all logic, reason, and common sense. It refuses to acknowledge the reality of federal loans and college tuition. Dr. Dyer is out to get me today, I know, as I listen to his next words. The only thing you can do with this life is to give it away. Even as the words settle into my brain, an image of Amma's body flashes through my mind. She took nothing with her. She just gave away everything she had. Yet, the essence of who she is lives on in us, her children, and every soul she touched during her earthly journey. 18 months after her passing, the flower seller and ironing woman still speak of her in reverential whispers. That is what lives on, long after the physical form is dead. It is compelling, this inner voice. It pulls and tugs at my heart. It won't let me be. Serve from the purest place within you.
That was beautiful. Both Loanne and Uma's books are absolutely wonderful and definitely worth reading. I'm going to read a short excerpt from my book, which is called On Dragonfly Wings, A Skeptic's Journey to Mediumship. Shortly after the news of Michael's death got around, friends and acquaintances started posting on his Facebook page. It quickly filled with words of love, of grief, of condolence. As I scrolled down the page and read these comforting words, I could feel Michael standing behind me. I want to read this, he said in my head, not knowing if this could be true. I left the page open on the screen, just in case. I knew that if I dared voice any of the above, in a room full of grieving relatives and friends, I'd be getting worried glances. The poor woman, they would have surely said. The grief and shock have messed with her mind. And this might be true, but for a reason unknown to me, or at least unknown back then. I was certain that Michael was not completely gone, that the plug had not been pulled, that he was still there.
Wow. Really lovely. Really lovely. Each in your own way, you have expressed to the world amazing, amazing gifts through these losses. And it's just a hard thing to share that there can be these gifts through these really dark times. I'm amazed that 3 different women from 3 different cultures and countries, and yes, skin color, can have this common experience that all really leads to nothing more than forgiveness and love. I'm sure a hard road and a hard journey at that, but it seems from all of your messages, it's just one that one must take and that it is so worthwhile. That's what I get from this.
And that there is hope, as you said, Patty. There is hope. And that many, many people, professional and unprofessional, really understand that we must work together to help heal the grief that is out there worldwide right now. And maybe we can take a good hard look at what causes the grief and work towards peace before there is grief.
Love that.
Yay! I love it. I just feel like doing a happy dance. This great talk with the International Grief Council, and my heart is full. I feel like my cup runneth over, and you know, we're not. Well, I was close to tears a few times, but they were tears of joy, and it's been absolutely wonderful hosting you. I hope we can see you again. After we're done here on the show, I invite you to go on our event page and in the comment tracker and put your name and your website and your book title, just information in case our guests would like to connect with you further. And yeah, I don't know. I'm speechless. It's great.
Well,
take it, Patty.
Sometimes that's generally never the case. But what I was going to say, if you're going to have that cry, Myste, you can have the ugly cry right here on Google Hangout for God and everybody, because we can do that as the Death Chicks. We get to cry and hug and laugh, and to me, death is a roller coaster ride of emotions, and it's the highs and the lows, and we've seen it all here today. I want to thank all of you so much for being with us, and just a reminder, our viewers, that it is the internationalgriefcouncil.org where you can find information on these three fabulous women who have a lot to share, and please make sure that you connect with them if that's where you're drawn.
And if I can just also thank you for having us and mention that I'm very excited because I live near Geneva, Switzerland, but we'll be meeting in September in the US, and we'll be giving a series of talks around New York, the New York area. So that would be an opportunity to connect face-to-face with people who are interested. But this is a wonderful opportunity you've given us to connect online, which is today feels almost as connecting face-to-face, and we really don't have to be in the same room to feel what we're all feeling right now. So yes. Thank you for that.
That richness. And did I see on your website that you were going to be in Ocean City, New Jersey? Was that on your website? I thought I saw. We have a home at the beach there, so I will definitely be.
Patty, that's where I live, and we will we're planning a talk at Georgian Court University. If you know where that is in Lakehurst.
Not exactly sure, but I will definitely look it up. Yes, that's great.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Patty and Myste, for this opportunity. This has been so wonderful, and you know, we will always remember your Google Hangout as our debut interview. So that this is very special. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. You're so welcome.
I think Loanne was speaking, and maybe your mic was off or something, Loanne, but we didn't catch what you were saying. So any final words?
Oh, no, I was saying that I live in the Jersey Shore area, which is close to Patty, but we are planning to do 3 talks in September, latter part of September. And if at this point in time we're putting it out to the universe to say, where do you want us to go? We will go. We are invited.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'll be there, hugging in person, not just in cyberspace. So.
Yay!
Good.
All right.
Yeah. Very good. So just for our next show, I haven't heard back from our scheduled guests. We do have a long list of people who are wanting to speak about death, and that is so wonderful. But for now, the guest for next week is a mystery guest. Having said that, Patty and I have also talked about doing just a Death Chicks show, so you get a chance to get to know us a little better. So if that's not next week, that's coming up. That'll be something like the Death Chicks Unplugged, where you might catch a bit of death humor. We do have some good belly laughs off air, so we're hoping to bring that little bit of humorous side into the show too, just to make things light. But we didn't want to start off with that. But that's all from me.
All right, well, that's it. We're going to wrap up and say goodbye, but never for too long, because we're all connected. And again, go out to the internationalgriefcouncil.org and find out more information and see how you might be able to serve if you're drawn. Thank you very much. Take good care, everyone, and we'll be speaking again soon, I'm sure. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye, Myste.
Um,